Good morning, everyone. My name is Andreea Dumitrașcu, and I'm part of the Connect University team. I'm delighted to welcome all of you to the second week of the Connect University Summer School 2021. Over 9,000 registrations from more than 70 countries across the globe, 16 inspiring sessions where 80 experts are explaining how can digital technologies be used to tackle climate change, both in terms of a greener digital system as well as their helping reducing carbon emissions across industries. All the sessions are recorded and can be reviewed afterwards, either directly on the Digital EU YouTube channel or on the Connect University webpage. You can still register for the following sessions. The links are published on Slido, and don't forget about the certificates that you can get if more than 7 sessions are attended. For today's event on tackling climate change with blockchain, we invite you to join us on Slido using the code blockchain. I repeat, the code for Slido is blockchain. You can comment, ask us questions, and we will allocate them accordingly to our distinguished speakers. Also, please use the hashtag ConnectUniversity when sharing insights on the event on social media. Without further ado, I am pleased to welcome Pierre Maro, Digital Innovation and Blockchain from DigiConnect European Commission, our moderator of today.
Good morning. Many thanks, Andrea. Welcome to this session of the Connect University dedicated to blockchain for climate change, or we could also call it blockchain for climate action. I'm Pierre Marot. I work for DigiConnect in the unit Digital Innovation and Blockchain. It's my pleasure to be the moderator of this session today and to welcome our speakers, with first my colleague Marco Loprieno from DG Climate Action, Principal Advisor. Also to welcome Jürg Fössler from Infras and from the Climate Ledger Initiative. To welcome also Antoine Lefebvre, who is the CEO of the Digital Services for Consumer and Companies in Suez Environment. To welcome Diana McDonald from Block, CEO of Block, which provides a solution in different sectors, in particular in the maritime industry using blockchain. And also Catherine Foster, that I would like to warmly thank. I hope that she will join very soon because she is it's the middle of the night on the other side of the Atlantic. But Catherine has made the effort to join us for this session. I would like to start soon by saying, let's say, a high-level definition about what is blockchain. I guess that through this Connect University, we have different profile within the audience. So we could define blockchain technology. Actually, it's more a family of technology. Enable people who may not know each other, who could be located in different parts of the on the step record of a transaction, and this can be done without the need to central intermediaries. And when we say a state of a transaction, it an exchange of information related to a product or the components of a product. It could be also an information regarding the state of a process. For instance, in supply chain, different players have to validate a different step of the if the value in being the technology which has enabled the cryptocurrency Bitcoin, the exchange of a certificate. It could be also, a transaction could be also the execution of a specific task and the guarantee of the execution of this task when some conditions are met. This is what is called a smart contract in the jargon of blockchain, which is also one of the really powerful feature of this technology. So if we consider this technology as a decentralized technology which integrates, which provide more trust in trustless environment or which improves the cooperation in multi-party process, we see already all the potential of this technology for climate change or for action aiming to mitigate climate change. And my colleagues later on will further introduce what are the type of application which are already implemented. It's not only a matter of potential, it's already we have already demonstration, we have already different type of pilot or even deployment which are already made in this area, and it will be what will be presented by the different speakers. So this technology enable by introducing a new different model, by facilitating the traceability or the transparency, by facilitating the inclusiveness of different participants in the process, has really a great potential. But technology itself is not something magic. Technology needs to be operated, needs to be put in place, and this means to organize cooperation with different parties. This is not something which is easy. It means also that we need to organize the governance. There will be probably a further discussion or presentation about on-chain or off-chain governance, but the fact that we have no central players doesn't mean that there is no governance at all in blockchain. And it means also that we need to pay attention about the interoperability or standardization aspect in order to facilitate that people acting in different parts of the world are able to speak together and to exchange information together through the blockchain. So our speakers will also introduce those elements that it's not only about the potential of the technology, it's also how to implement this technology, which really matters. This session will be also the opportunity to clarify one ambiguity. I mean, blockchain is often considered as a technology which is energy consuming, and hence some people consider that it should be not taken into account as a solution for climate actions. And this will be clarified today, because this vision is related to the most famous application of blockchain, which is Bitcoin, which indeed is a solution which is energy consuming. But blockchain can be implemented in totally different ways and make it very relevant with reasonable energy consumption. If we look at the added value provided in terms of trust or facilitation of multi-party process, and it makes actually blockchain to be extremely relevant for tackling climate change. So having introduced blockchain that way, you will get further illustration and example of concrete projects that are started to be implemented, and also discussion about what are the conditions in order to facilitate this implementation at a scale which reflect what is at stake regarding the climate change. And I would like now to give the floor to my colleagues Marco Lupriano, that will introduce further what are the objectives in Europe regarding climate actions, and also he will introduce his view about what blockchain could do in order to improve the emission trading system for carbon certificates. Marco, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Pierre. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. And in fact, what I will try to do very briefly this morning is to complement Pierre's introduction, giving to everybody, let's say, the flavor of what is very important right now here in Brussels related to climate policy. And I really appreciated that Pierre didn't mention too much the word climate change, because in fact it's not just a change that we're facing, but it is an emergency. So we are really under a lot of pressure in order to develop the right policy instrument, the right implementation policy. And personally, I'm very convinced that digital technology, and specifically blockchain, is very important and will really be one of the most important tool in order to facilitate this big change of the society that we are going to have with our targets, which are mainly related to two main targets, which are really the one on which we are working right now, and the one on which what we call I'm sorry, but I'm trying. There is something which is not really working. Okay, I understand. The main two targets that we are facing now in Brussels, really in developing the most important policy they are going to be launched soon to tackle this climate emergency are the one related to 2030. I don't know if you can see my slides. Perhaps not. Sorry, I'm trying to. Okay, well, there is something which is not really very good, and I'm trying to share again the story. Okay, I don't know. I'm sorry, the slides disappear. Anyhow, you will receive the slides together with the others in the context of the recording of the whole event. But in fact, what? Sorry. In fact, just very briefly, I mean, the main package on which we are working right now is called Fit for 55, and it comprises around 10, 12 policy initiatives that will be presented by the Commission in next month, on the 14th of July. And those are the instruments that will really allow us to reach the first target, which is the one that we have to achieve in 2030, which is a reduction of minus 55% of emission related to 1990. And that is very important in order to achieve the other most important target, which is the one related to complete full decarbonization by 2050. So in 30 years' time, we have really to change quite completely our way of producing things, our way of consuming things in the European Union, but of course not only in the European Union, because that is really the way in which we will try a little bit to contrast this dramatic climate emergency that we will be facing more and more in the following years. I just want to recall here two statements made by the President of the Commission, Mrs. von der Leyen, which say that carbon emission must have a price. Every person and every sector will have to contribute, so everybody will have to contribute according to, of course, his or her means to that reduction. And also another statement made by the deputy, the vice president, the executive vice president of the Commission, Mr. Timmermans, in which he said that transition needs to be just, or it is just not going to happen. So there is really the accent which is put on the fact that the transition must be accompanied by other policies that will make possible not to have just a strong imposition top down, but having something which gradually but fastly, nevertheless, will have to be done by everybody. In that context, I tried in my presentation that you can see, unfortunately, because it disappeared, but I tried really to imagine what blockchain could do for the main policy tool that we have available right now on climate policy, which is the EU emissions trading system. It's called the EU ETS, which is really a financial incentive that is given. We cover 11,000 installations for the moment in more than 30 countries. And it is a financial incentives and a market instrument, really, a kind of stock market according to which operators, industrial operators, have really an incentive to cut down their emission and to be much more less to pollute much less in terms of CO2 and other greenhouse gas emissions. That is the main system we have available. If somebody is interested in knowing more about DTS, we have a lot of material on our website, on DigiClimate Action website, so you can really access to that material and you have everything there. As I said, is functioning just putting a cap on the emission and that a limit on the emission, and that limit is gradually going to be less and less. And that's something that is functioning very well. It started in 2005. So we have quite a lot of years, 16 years of running this tool. It's not only a European tool because there are now other carbon markets that are starting in different countries. The most important will be the Chinese one that is has started after a pilot phase started this year, and that will be a very, very large carbon market that will help a lot the People's Republic of China in cutting down their emission. As I said, that is really going to be also part of this Fit for 55 package, which is a kind of mix of the most relevant legislative proposal that will produce the legislations, the laws, the regulations, the directives that will allow us to start reaching those targets that I was mentioning before. In that context, on the traditional ETS, we are proposing also new changes. The ETS will cover new sectors. The most immediate and the most important one will be the maritime sector. So that is a kind of global sector which is very much growing in terms of emission, and we need to regulate it. But also we'll try to be to cover other sectors, other areas of our day-by-day living that are very important for their own CO2 emission, which are the transport and buildings, the accommodations. Now you have to take into account that DTS alone is covering more or less 45% of the emission in the European Union, just covering those industrial sectors that I was mentioning before, the main energy intensive ones. If we manage to cover buildings and transport, we will have a much broader coverage of the emission. I think we will reach something around 65–70%. Of course, that will not be easy. That will put quite a lot of pressure on everybody, because when we talk about transport, everybody is concerned in terms of using public transport, using private transport, and so on. And when we talk about buildings, of course, for example, households will be the first one to be target all along the chain in terms of dealing perhaps with changes in prices, perhaps in trying to adopt new technologies, new tools in order to cut down the emission. Now, coming back to the main point of today's discussion, how blockchain can be used in this context. Um, Blockchain, this is just my personal opinion, because in a way, I'm in DigiClimate, we start now exploring the role of blockchain. We haven't really made any practical application of that. But as Pierre was mentioning before, blockchain, due to their own um, identity, if I may say so, can really speed up and a lot of the process that we are dealing with now can really cut down a lot of the cost that we are incurring just now in managing all these legislative tools. Also, they can be interested in the context of these new areas that we are going to tackle. The maritime sector, for example, but because, for example, in the maritime sector already some of big groups, the real large players in that market are using blockchain, for example, in the field of logistics, so will not be so much difficult to try to imagine a system in which blockchain can be used to tackle emissions from the different players. Now, in conclusion of my intervention, I would like really to go back to the point made at the beginning with the statement of Mr. Timmermans when he says there is transition needs to be just, or otherwise it's going to be very difficult to have this large and big change in the society. We need to develop incentives in order to make it possible to have this huge change in society, in industry, in our everyday life. I think it will not be impossible to imagine, not for today, of course, because everything needs to be properly studied, properly developed. It will not be impossible to imagine having tomorrow a kind of ETS, a kind of carbon market, which is really targeting the individual consumer, the small emitters, which is really going in that way to complement very well what we are doing now, because now we are really just tackling the large emitters and the large consumers of fuels and other resources. So I would say that's my personal opinion, of course, but I think a blockchain will be very important in order to develop the kind of digital ETS, if we may call it in that way.
Thank you, Marco. I think looking.
I'm sorry for the presentation.
Many thanks to remind and to set the scene in terms of what are the policy expectations and with a specific focus on emission trading system. Looking at the clock, considering that we started a bit later, I propose now that we move directly to your in his presentation that will help to explain what is blockchain, how it can help, and also to start to introduce some applications, some use cases that will be. So, Jörg, the floor is yours. Thanks. Jörg, we cannot hear you. Is it normal?
Hello? Yes, I hope you can hear me now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes,
And
go ahead.
great, thank you. So good morning, everybody, and a big thank you for inviting us from the Climate Ledger initiative to this great event. I think we have quite a large plate of different things to work on. I will start with a short introduction of some of the basic concepts of blockchain, and then present three concrete use cases that the Climate Ledger initiative is implementing all over the world, and end with a word on the role of governance, which we think is very important in the context of using blockchain for climate change. We will afterwards go, say, from bottom to the top, or from the smaller to the bigger, going into recycling with Antoine, and how blockchain can make improve recycling. We will then have Diane with a great overview of how global value chains can be decarbonized, and finally Catherine, which will also then from the more broader view give a overarching global view on the role of blockchain for climate action. So my name is Jörg Füßler. I'm with the Climate Ledger initiative, and also working with Infras, a research and consultancy company in Switzerland. First, a brief word about the Climate Ledger initiative. We founded that like 3 years ago, and the main aim was to bring together different players, because there you have the blockchain tech world, and you have the climate change, the climate policy guys, you have different governments, you have negotiators, and they don't interact too much, and our aim is to bring them together to provide a platform for joint learning, for instance, with this webinar, but also with side events at international climate negotiations. We work on knowledge products, and we just have 6 new use cases. So we also finance early stages use cases for the use of blockchain in climate action, be it climate mitigation, be it adaptation, and also climate finance. We are financed by Switzerland, Liechtenstein, and also use Climate Kick, and run by Gold Standard and Infras, my company. So just a brief introduction. What is blockchain? It's basically not much more than a new kind of decentralized database. So it's a way to store things and to track things. The new aspect is data is not stored centrally anymore, but it is stored in a distributed way on many computers, and also these different computers, they check each other, they make sure that the entries are made are correct. And also an important aspect is that these entries are linked in a cryptographic way, so that you can't change them without other noticing. So basically what you have is that you have, if a new block of data is written to this blockchain, you make a hash of the last block, a kind of a digital fingerprint, and you introduce this fingerprint into the next block, and then you store it on the blockchain, and so on and so on. And with that, you cannot change just one block, and because you would have to forge or change the entire chain in order to manipulate the blockchain. Therefore, you have a specially secure system. Now, the blockchain is really that system of different nodes, different computers interacting, all hashing. And if you have if everybody is on the same level, you have a problem, namely, you have to define who is to introduce the next block. And to solve that, some blockchains are using the so-called proof of work. In that approach, the question is, okay, who is the most powerful computer in the network? And to prove that, they solve like a cryptographic puzzle, and the node, the computer that is the fastest, gets the right to mine, to put in the next block of data. The big problem is that this mining in the proof of work approach requires a lot of energy, and increasingly so. And you for sure have heard of the huge energy consumption of systems like Bitcoin. Here in this graph, you see the power consumption of different systems compared to building heights. So the first is Bitcoin. If the power consumption for one transaction would be translated into a building, it would be the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, 800 meters high, a huge power consumption. Another system is Ethereum, which also uses proof of work. There, one transaction is more like the Tower of Pisa. So it's still 60 meters, but much less. And there are other approaches, for instance, proof of stake, which is basically the node shows how much assets they have in a way. With such an approach with Ethereum, you would have more like a nail's height, or 2.5 centimeters of height in terms of power consumption. So this shows there are different systems, different consumption. The big issue is we always thought, okay, this problem will vanish over time. And it was said, for instance, with Ethereum, this is to be expected in 2018, but it never really happened. So in our view, it's still a big issue, the power consumption. If you use blockchain for climate action, you need to work with blockchains that use much less power. And also the Climate Ledger Initiative is of the opinion that using, for instance, renewable energy certificates or carbon offsets to offset the high power consumption is not the way, because that renewable power will be needed for cars and other things. Now, evolution of the systems, everything started with Bitcoin, the huge digital currency you heard of, and then more and more digital assets were put on a blockchain, such as diamonds, but also carbon units. And then also the concept of smart contracts have been introduced. These are little programs where you can say, for instance, if 10 kilowatt hours of wind power are produced, then you issue a carbon unit. Now, in the last 3 years, this has been complemented by other integrated technologies, and that's really the main development. So you mix these blockchains with things like remote sensing, with smartphones, with simple phones, with sensors, with Internet of Things, and with that you get much more value and much more functionality out of the systems. Now let's go to the climate policy world, because that's the aim, and let's have a look at 3 specific use cases that use blockchain. And I will go into one use case in the Amazon to prevent illegal login. One is a blockchain-based agricultural insurance product, and lastly, a blockchain-based registry system for carbon markets. Now, this is one of the climate ledger's initiative use cases. So this is about wood tracking in the Amazon in Peru. Basically, what you have is the loggers, you have the transporters of wood, and you have the wood processing companies. They all have simple smartphones, but these are smartphones. They tag each tree that is basically locked at the beginning with a little QR code tag. And with that and the smartphone app, you can then trace the individual tree through the whole production chain, from logging to transportation to processing until it's sold. And of course, this helps to assure and produce trust, and that this is actually legally, sustainably logged wood, and you can reduce illegal logging with that. Also, it turns out that the wood loggers, they really like the app because they get oversight. They know also how much they logged where, and helps them to do better business. The second use case is the EtherRisk use case. So this is about the problem of smallholder farmers in Kenya, which because of climate change have to suffer more and more drought over time, which diminish their yield. And the idea here is to offer them a very simple agricultural insurance product that they can buy over a simple cellular phone app. So you don't need a smartphone, you just send a text message, and with that you buy the insurance contract. If a drought comes and the satellite system detects that drought, then the payment is released, and the farmers are compensated for the loss in yield. And important is that the payment is much faster than with earlier agricultural insurance, and also the blockchain system helps to increase the trust, because many farmers don't trust too much insurance companies. And also there is quite a large efficiency gain, because you directly communicate with your phone, with the insurance. You don't have all the intermediaries, and you can get cost reductions of around 40%, meaning that the farmers get much more from the money they pay in the end. And the last example I just want to highlight is blockchain-based registries for international carbon markets. Under the Paris Agreement, Article 6, different countries can cooperate in implementing carbon instruments and use carbon markets. And here also, earlier we had a centralized system under Kyoto with one huge UNFCCC registry. With the EU registry, things were centralized top down, but now with the Paris Agreement, things are much more diverse, and here blockchain can help to increase interoperability and to glue different heterogeneous carbon markets together. I think Catherine will also have more on that important topic. Here, a quick overview of what the blockchain brings for the Paris agreements. It's about decentralization, transparency, all these things that are needed to improve international climate action. And I would like to end with indicating two of our knowledge products. So the first is our annual flagship report, the Navigating Blockchain and Climate Action report, where you can read all about use cases, but also about the interaction between policy and using these use cases. And our last publication, which came out just last month, was done together in collaboration with the International Association for Trusted Blockchain Applications. This is on the key topic of governance issues in using blockchain for climate action, be it on the blockchain level of on-chain, off-chain governance big on the national level. If you use, for instance, blockchain to regulate your local energy markets, if you sell, for instance, power to your neighbor, and of course on the international level of the Paris Agreement, where also specific governance regulation are needed to make blockchain for climate action work. With that, I stop, and thanks.
Many thanks, Jörg. We have got some questions from the Slido. One was about other use case. So you have started to introduce them, other use case than Bitcoin, or you have started to introduce them very clearly, and we'll continue with the other speakers. But we have a more technical question that we have also addressed is regarding the transition between proof of work and proof of stake regarding energy consumption. And another technical question, maybe you can focus on that one, is there are forks in the blockchain areas, and what are the implications of this potential of forking for blockchain if we need to use them as a proof of truth, as a single proof of truth? Do you have some reflection to share with?
Yes, I mean, just very briefly. I mean, there are tons of things to consider. In particularly if you use purely permissionless blockchains, meaning you don't have any let's say outside of authority governing these things. What we see is that in climate action we don't have often pure blockchains like the Bitcoin thing, but you have, for instance, blockchains that are run by, say, 5 different countries. So you have that intermediary heterogeneous approaches, and the very pure blockchains you don't see often these times. And then you also don't have the same kind of questions with forking for instance. That's my short answer.
Many thanks, and many thanks again for having clarified blockchain, even if in 5-10 minutes it's always a challenge. But I propose that we move now to Antoine Lefebvre, that will introduce other, in particular for the circular economy. And of course, we can come back to Q&A at the end of this session. So Antoine, the floor is yours, please.
Hello, could you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Very good. So thank you, Pierre, for the introduction, and thank you, Jörg, for the explanation of the blockchain. Very useful. In this 20-minute session, we'll talk about circular economy. So even if climate change and circular economy are two different concepts, we do know that they are very closely linked. And circular economy has a massive impact on the climate change. So my name is Antoine Lefebvre. I am in charge of the digital solution for citizens and businesses at Suez, and we developed solutions to help our customers reducing their environmental footprint. And I am very pleased to be with you and to be with the Connect University community today. So I will introduce a solution that we call internally circular chain, the circular economy blockchain, and its first application in the agricultural sector. So we have prepared a surprise for you, which is a short 1-minute video that we will post in the chat, and you may have a look after the session if you like to. It will introduce you the concept in less than 1 minute. I hope that you will like this video. So the question is, first question that I would like to discuss with you is why we develop such solutions. So as you know, I'm sure you know that within a month, July 29th exactly, it will be the Earth Overshoot Day. So as you know, this day marks a date when humanity's demand for ecological resources and services for natural resources in a given year will exceed what Earth can generate in this year. So concretely, what does it mean? After this date, will live on credit, and all resources that we'll be using will not be renewed. And so we see that we are using massively and very much too massively the resources. And we know on top of this that in the last 50 years, so since 1970, the extraction of natural resources has tripled. And the bad news is that this figure will continue to grow if we do not change and it will double by 2050. So definitely there is an emergency. The resources of the planet are in danger, and we need to act. And that's really the purpose of the Green Deal and the Sustainable Development Goals. And we really need to quickly shift for what we call the current linear economy, or the linear model based on take, make, expose, to a much more circular economy. We need to manage waste, but we need to manage resources, and we need to make sure that resources can be reused, and we need to make sure that we are shifting our mindset and that we are moving to a life cycle thinking mindset, as is displayed in this diagram. So you see in this diagram what in a very short diagram what linear economy means. But today, circular economy represents less than 10% of the resources used every year. So it's still too few. We need to make the recycled resources the norm and not the exception. And we believe that technology, and more specifically blockchain, could help in this regard. So let me shift for the next slide. So how it works and why we say that blockchain could help using more recycled resources. The first thing, and it has been clearly said by Marco, Jörg, and Pierre, blockchain will bring trust on recycled waste and recycled resources. It will bring trust, and it will bring collaboration between all actors of the ecosystem. And this is very important. So, and doing this with more trust in recycled resources, there will be more use because they will meet the expectation of, first, as you see in the diagram, citizen who look more and more, and that's a very good news for more eco-friendly and sustainable products. That will also meet the expectations of industries. Industries first want to meet the expectation of their customers, of citizens, of you, me, and everybody. But they are also looking for resources that are less expensive and that are safe, because obviously they produce goods from recycled material, and they really want safe and inexpensive market. And more on top of this, I think that it's a more societal expectation. More and more people, more and more states ask for more transparency, and that's very good news. And this is translating in more regulation, more certification. And what we've tried to do with circulation is to anticipate all those expectations thanks to blockchain. So how does it works? I've planned a sequence to re-explain blockchain, but that has been made very clearly by Jörg, so I will not really comment on this. I will just highlight some few points and key points that are, I think, important for me. So you understood that blockchain is really about data recording. And what is new with blockchain is that the data is secured by networks, by an ecosystem, and its actors of this ecosystem, what we call also a node, as a copy of the transaction. So tomorrow, if somebody wants to change an information or to corrupt information, he will have to do it not only on his own copy of the information, but on all the copy that exists in the network. So you see that it becomes quite impossible to change an information, and This is the reason why we said that that's both decentralized, and we said that information is immutable, and this is what we definitely provide additional trust. On the energy consumption, I will also comment and complete what I said by Jörg. What we have put in place in Suez is a validation for what we call a proof of authorities. And here, the number of stakeholders involved is limited to the number of actors of the value chains that include the circular economy, that may include in circular economy states, non-governmental associations, large brands, citizens, and many companies. So even if, and we have a very reduced number of actors that provide the guarantee and that guarantees the data. And using this limited number of actors, we have a very limited number consumption of energy. And if you remember the diagram from Jörg, that's even lower than the screw that we've seen together in the last session. So let's go and let's be concrete. What do you call, and let's go through a concrete example. And as I mentioned previously, the first application of the blockchain we deployed is indeed in the agricultural world, and to support the return to the soil of nutrients contained in the wastewaters. So I don't know if you have ever asked what your wastewater become, but that's a good day and a good session to know, and I will be pleased to go through the journey of the wastewater. So there is a short diagram that I am pleased to comment with you. So the wastewater, when they leave your home, when they leave your building, they are collected by sewers, and they are going to a plant, what we call a wastewater plant, une station d'épuration en français, and there is two products that go out of the plant after the treatment done by the plant. The first one is obviously clean waters that go back to the environment, and the second one is what we call sludges. And sludges is like soil. It's composed of microorganisms and many nutritive elements such as nitrogen and phosphorus. And those sludges are analyzed by a laboratory, and they are stored in specific treatment, in specific storage platform where they also have some treatment. And when they are ready, meaning that when analyses are good and the treatment has operated to make them safe, they are sprayed on soils, and they are sprayed for reuse on agriculture. And the spreading use transporter that carry the sludge close to the agricultural plot. And after, there is some specific company that will, and with farmers, that will spread those sludges on soils. So all this closed loop, very local loop, because those spreading is made near to the large city, has agronomical benefits, also environmental benefits, because we are talking about closed loop, and also are very economical. So in France, that's more than 70% of sludges that are sprayed, which represents 7 million of tons. And doing this, we avoid to bring artificial nitrogen that will consume energy, or to use mine phosphorus that will use massive and important natural resources. So you see that in this circle we involve 6 to 7 players but we also need to mention municipalities that are in charge of the wastewater treatment. We also need to involve citizens. So on all this ecosystem, we have about 7 up to 10 actors. And thanks to the blockchain, all stakeholders have a direct access to the precise and tamper-proof information of the recovery and national value of sludge, and the confidence of this process is reinforced. So at the end of the day, what we bring with circulation, and after, if you want, I will show you some screen copy and some example. We bring benefit to each actors. First, obviously, of operators that help to manage sludge efficiency and improve cooperation with all other stakeholders, and we reduce many risk of errors. For agriculture, we have now access through a map of all individual input, and that's nearly real time. And for municipalities, they have secured the sludge return to the soils, and they have also a faster answer to citizens when they have some questions. So, and for the state, they have now a very easy way to control all the process. So that's this solution built with all actors will benefit all the value chain. And we had some great feedback from the different actors. We have implemented these first use cases in Nantes metropolis, which is a very large metropolis in France with more than 650,000 people, and implemented with more than 130 farmers in more than 5 plants, and we are now deploying the same solutions in much more municipalities. So if you want to have a look, so basically what we have done is that in the core application that you see in the middle of the screen, that's link all the different type of transaction, and we do like a digital twin of all the story of the sludge. That's the core application we saw in the middle of the screen. We have built also a mobile app to help transporter to register the information in the blockchain. And we have also developed a convenient visualization web portal for municipality and for agriculture, for farmers, to see exactly the quantity of nutriment that has been sprayed on their soil and for each plot. So here you have some as the other screen of the mobile application for transporters. Here you see that one is very short and very straightforward, but all the story of spreading with the reference of the splat, and also the laboratory analysis that confirm the validity of the sludge that has been sprayed on a dedicated day. And here you see how municipalities can use a solution to see where the sludge has been sprayed, and which type of nutriment has been sent back to the soils. And here you see what is commonly used by farmers to see plot by plot what has been put on the soils, thanks to the traceability of the spreading process. So to solve we have used the blockchain to foster the interaction and the interconnection between all the actors of this value chain. We believe that there is much more use cases in the circular economy, and we have built a circular chain to welcome other type of resources. So that today we are working in other resources such as plastic, polluted soil, and everything that is valuable for the environment and to come back to the environment. And I will be happy to further comment and answer your question now or at the end of the session. Yeah, I give you the floor. I give you back.
Many thanks. Many thanks. We have one question from the audience which concerns the fact that the circular economy could be a new opportunity for criminal organization to do their business, if I can express myself that way. The question is, do you think that blockchain can help to eliminate those criminal organizations? Can you take this question?
Yes, obviously. I mean that really blockchain, and this is what we've seen, that gives more trust on the resources. And doing so regarding this question of criminality, if we use blockchain on the logistic of waste becoming a resource, we will avoid corruption on the information and so on. So we will secure the resource, and doing this will give also more value to this resource. So definitely blockchain can be used also in this regard.
Many thanks, Antoine. I think it was a great illustration about another concrete use case. So I propose that now we continue our journey with other use case related to the climate action or action for the environment. I'm very pleased to pass the floor to Diana, that will present a new application, in particular in the maritime industry or activities. Go ahead, Diana.
Hello, and thank you for having me today. As mentioned, my name is Deanna MacDonald, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Block, originally standing for Blockchain Labs for Open Collaboration. And we work on building consortiums and bringing new collaboration models for better governance around how we develop, apply, and test blockchain solutions. And today I'll be talking about the role of blockchain in greening global value chains. And we'll also be talking from the perspective of my other company, a spin out from one of the blockchain prototypes that we validated called Bunker Trace. So what I plan to discuss today is to show the role of blockchain with the greening of sustainable value chains. From a technical perspective, what elements blockchain brings to that type of traceability in our supply chains, which I believe is the fundamental application for applied blockchain. And then I'll move into a case study with Bunker Trace, as I mentioned, wherein we'll showcase how in the real world or in applied setting, we are tracing marine fuels for the maritime sector or shipping emissions, monitoring, reporting, and verification, which ultimately would underpin any type of European ETS system, for example, or any carbon markets we're looking to try to incentivize this sector to decarbonize with. So I hope to be able to provide you with both a theoretical and application and tangible based approach to blockchain for what I would say is traceability. So to begin, essentially right now in this day and age when we've had globalization factoring into how we structure and create our supply chains, they've become more and more complex, more global, of course, in nature. They've been very fragmented, and there is a lack of oversight, and there is quite a lot of opacity in our supply chains. So provenance is a very difficult thing, and traceability of the different components in our supply chains, where they come from, where they're going to, is a very difficult aspect right today, given the way we've structured. But also a lot of how our supply chains operate is based on paper-based record keeping. This is very specific as well to the maritime sector. I'll go into that in detail as well, but also across the board. So when you're talking about paper-based record keeping and complex and fragmented global supply chains, there's pain points across the entire industry and sectors around the areas of creating traceability, traceability used as a means of compliance for any type of regulation, environmental, social regulation that may be at play. There's a lack of accountability given the fact that there is a lack of also traceability and enforcement is obviously a very difficult endeavor as well. So those, generally speaking, those pain points within our global value chains are ripe, create a ripe situation for technologies such as blockchain, which essentially creates improved information transparency, and if applied properly, of course, and also in conjunction with other technologies.
Diana, I'm sorry to interrupt
Yeah.
you, but people cannot see your presentation. So
No. Okay. I've just been talking 1 second here. Bum, bum, bum. All right.
okay,
Good.
I think it's
Okay,
okay now.
all right.
Please go ahead. I'm sorry.
Great. Thank you for letting me know. I'll go one back just so it's also visible again. So the four, big problem areas right now within global value chains that's associated with the paper-based record keeping is around traceability, compliance, accountability in our supply chains, and enforcement of any type of regulations. And when it comes to the role that blockchain can play in traceability in global supply chains, we have several features, and I won't go into the technical aspect because Jörg did very well with that, and I think that the implications of blockchain right now is what I'll focus on. So the features of this technology, when used in conjunction with others and also when applied, can create auditability around the actual supply chains themselves and the commodities flowing through these supply chains, the immutable element of how the data and information is stored creates security and trust in that information as well, and allows one to verify that that source of truth or that source of information that is now more accessible is essentially something that you can then govern and create enforcement mechanisms around or link to market incentives. So I think that from kind of a theoretical perspective is how blockchain, at least the features of blockchain, can play into connecting all the actors in the value chain and also essentially starting to create some traceability and accountability in the supply chain. That being said, it's not blockchain necessarily alone. We're talking about digitization efforts, generally speaking. So in effect, if moving in tandem with digitization of these supply chains, the underpinning technology we might be appending that data and that information to might be a blockchain, but it only goes hand in hand with digitization. And that is obviously a very massive challenge we face in general when you're dealing with very paper-based analog processes and supply chains. So on that being said, in a digitally native environment, such as those in cryptocurrencies, for example, where you're talking about, digital currencies that are linked to digital purchases, blockchain makes sense, it works well, but I argue, and what I will be arguing throughout here, is that blockchain in isolation does not create value propositions when used only on its own. And that the gains of blockchain can only really be recognized when you take care of the last mile or the actual implementation and interface between that system and our physical world and also our societal one. So how do we link it to the physical world? These are things I would concern myself with as the last mile. How do we ensure data is input into the system correct? We've got the classic garbage in, garbage out problem, or you're only as good as the information put into a system. So what data points you're collecting and where are you getting them from? How do you know that they're validated source of data? Because technology in of itself doesn't provide the trust, but the governance of how you've implemented the technology will. So those are some very important aspects that I believe create the trust in the blockchain, or create the trust in blockchain-based systems that we otherwise take for granted because everybody says, this technology creates that trust on its own. So if you do take care of that last mile, there are quite a lot of breakthroughs within, especially value chain and supply chain traceability, that I think are very important, not only because they change the game in which we've been used to when it comes to digitization efforts, but it allows us to start to create some oversight and accountability in supply chains. So from that perspective, and again, I will mention that a lot of this is only in conjunction with digitization, is the fact that we can reduce complexities, of course, associated with paper-based processes. That's not native to blockchain. That's something that we can do when we just create digital processes. But that being said, the accountability and the assurances that we get from storing information on a blockchain help to reduce those complexities as well. We can create that evidence that's required, the immutable evidence, provided that we work in tandem with, legal, insurance, and governmental bodies to recognize the evidence that we're creating, the technical legitimatization of this information as well is important. And we can gain efficiencies from verified reporting. That can be, electronic submission, again, not blockchain innovation by any means, but the verified information that you're sending through to a system that comes from a blockchain-based system. So, for example, an API integration into a reporting in ERP system inside of a company, or furthermore, with a certification or inspection agency that works with that data, or even a government, for example. And then the informed decision making that's available through accessible and trusted provenance on the data of our commodity chains and of our supply chains is a very big breakthrough in terms of value chain upgrading and the greening of value chain when you use this for those purposes. So with that being said, hopefully set the stage for what I would like to now discuss a bit more in detail is the tracing of marine fuels for shipping emissions monitoring, reporting, and verification, or put more bluntly, we at Bunker Trace are tracing bunker fuel for the shipping sector. And why and how? Well, at this point in time, obviously more than 90% of all goods are transported via international shipping routes. So 90% of everything that you see in the room around you right now has come off of a ship. However, this sector and these ships have largely gone under-regulated and unnoticed by much of society. They've been transported using heavy fossil fuel oils as marine fuel. We call this in the industry as well peanut butter sludge. You sometimes hear it is a very viscous, bottom of the barrel, almost crude oil mixture that's being put into these ships moving throughout the entire world on our oceans. And this sector accounts for not only 3% of global CO2 emissions, which, if left unabated and business as usual persists, we're looking at this rising to about 40% more per year, and up to 30% of the global CO2 emissions coming from the shipping sector by 2050. It's 9% of global sulfur emissions, and it's 15% of the nitrous oxide emissions that we produce globally. This is also a heavy sector for black carbon, which eats away at our ozone layer. Yet, this sector is not included in the Paris Agreement. The emissions that come off ships are not also accounted in national emission inventories. And when you're talking about a non-jurisdictional global industry, how one regulates becomes very challenging. We have what is called the International Maritime Organization, a UN body based in the UK that regulates, or at least sets the regulations for the industry. But these regulations are implemented and enforced by nation states or port states. So it's a very challenging governance structure when you're talking about maritime law and maritime supply chains. But in January 1st, 2020, the first sulfur cap or sulfur limit came into effect for this sector. Yet carbon levels are remained unregulated. It remains unclear how they will be regulated and what goals will be set, what regulations will be put in place. So across these boundaries, it is very important that there is a consistent fuel accounting system that underpins this sector, or we will not be able to A, regulate, or B, be able to green or decarbonize this supply chain. So that's where we come in. We're talking about, and I've been shocked to learn a lot about this supply chain. It's honestly one of the, and I've worked in a lot of heavy industries before in my past, but this is one that is wrought with fraud, theft, adulteration of the fuel. So a lot of changing of the fuel. You'll have cases where chemicals from dry cleaning companies or from industrial waste processes have been dumped into the bunker barge that delivers the fuel to ships. Obviously, these ships are very old and colossal machines that can pretty much run on anything. So it's one of the dirtiest and most polluting supply chains in the world. There is no data. No one knows the content or calorific content, energy content of fuels. Everything is paper-based. That makes it easy to manipulate information and to change information. Fuel is skimmed off the top and resold, not even in a black market, but in this sector. And it's very difficult to implement and enforce the new sulfur regulations or any type of regulation for that matter. And then when we are talking about emission trading schemes and how we can incentivize these markets and how we can create retrofitting and carbon levy programs, unless the data is there, unless the data is trusted and verified as to where this fuel is coming, where it's going to, and what it contains, then we will not be able to take on the next steps. So that's where we focus. And now one more point before I show you how we do it is that although the digital tracing of supply chains is a very big improvement, and that's what I discovered in Block when we did this lab, it is a very big improvement on the supply chain. But what happens when these physical goods, in this case fuel, is adulterated, it's manipulated, it's modified in the supply chain? And what happens when I'm reporting digitally something that actually physically isn't a representation of what's going on? So why is my system showing that this fuel is clean and in good when at the same time in reality it's caused engine failure at sea, or it's actually been tested later on to find out that it's not what they thought they had ordered or what was delivered? So how can we be sure that what is digitally reported actually represents physical reality? And that was a challenge I was faced with firsthand, having applied it just in a digital sense. So where I spend my time in application is bridging the digital to the physical. If we are going to talk about tracing any type of commodity or tracing any type of supply chain that's rounded and rooted in the physical world, where we have these commodities that are changing hands and open to being modified in any way, whether they're production processes or otherwise, we need to have a link between the digital to the physical, or even that information in a blockchain that now becomes immutable, can't be trusted, as far as I'm concerned. So what we do is a bit sci-fi. We add synthetic DNA tags to the fuel, which serves as a physical tracer that is then associated to a digital identity and traced digitally through our applications in the field that allow us to trace the transactions of the fuel. At the same time, physically tracing the fuel and ensuring that that fuel is still the same as when it came in to when it's being sold, or furthermore, if it's not, we have evidence to show. It's not tamper-proof. Nothing can be really tamper-proof, I could argue, but it is tamper-evident, and that way eventually tamper-resistant. So how we do that, we physically tag, as I mentioned, so we add a synthetic tag and flag to these systems. Our tag allows us to add a unique fingerprint ID, synthetic DNA, which is tagged at 1 part per trillion. So it's in fact a forensic technology that is impossible to find and modify or in any way tamper with the technology itself. But if you tampered with the fuel itself, we'd be able to identify that because we have a chemiluminescent flasher as well, called a flag, that we add. We're then able to, with that flag, detect in the field under 3 minutes whether that fuel has been adulterated or not with our hardware that we also develop. So the hardware detection units are playing a big role in creating informed decision making. And then we have the digital components. So we have our web app for starting up a bunkering transaction and procuring the fuel, etc. And then we have our mobile app that's used in the field by the surveyors, by the vessel chief engineers, by those that are handling the fuel. So with all of that, we create a system and API integrations to be able to report this trusted and verified data that comes from multiple sources in the supply chain. Why does that matter? Well, I'm going to take us really quickly before I end here through the example of biofuel, which is what we focus on tracing in all renewables in this sector, because the feedstocks and the fuel blends are all a matter of tracing their components, where they come from, if you're going to gain access to these market incentives. But there's a very big challenge that we have. Clean fuel subsidies throughout the US, the EU, Asia as well, have been shown to be very susceptible to fraud. There's increased reports of, the sources of these biofuels not being from sustainably sourced waste streams, but instead actually being harvested from new resources. We have carbon credits or even fuel and emission trading schemes and fuel credits that are being that are being taken up that have no supply chain associated to them. So the same one batch of fuel, for example, can get $100 million worth of credits. The uniqueness of the source of information is not there. And as a result, we have a lot of challenges to face if we want to trust the supply chain of biofuels and furthermore renewables. So while they're key to decarbonization, we need to understand where the feedstock origin is from, have a guarantee of that origin and the provenance on origin, as well as a chain of custody solution that's cost effective, accessible, understandable, and easy to implement. That's a tall order. But that's what we focus on with Bunker Trace. So while we have those in the field that add the tag and flag, we can move upstream to any type of feedstock that's already certified. For example, some rapeseed waste stream from a certified producer, they apply for our tag and flag, they add it to that feedstock. Any other feedstocks that are certified have our tag and flag added as well. And then later down the supply chain, you eventually see a pie chart of all of the different components that fuel comes from. And with the help of our digital app, we're able to create a chain of custody that authenticates the origin of the certified feedstock, that improves supply chain controls and monitoring, which is absolutely crucial to this to the success and uptake of these green fuels, and to ensure the incredibly integrity of the fuels themselves. And lastly, what that creates is an accountable accounting system, essentially, that you can use then as the basis across different jurisdictions as a standard, regardless of their national regulatory regimes or regardless of the non-jurisdictional nature of the shipping sector. What we essentially are doing is leveling the playing field. We're creating a solution that can work across anywhere in the world, that is a global solution in that it is enforceable scientific-based evidence and technical evidence. It maintains the fungibility and the fungible nature of these fuels in global commodity trade and the flow of this trade. And we introduce an audible and enforceable system for regulatory compliance. We are not the regulators, we are not the enforcers, but we are able to create and show the information required for those that are enforcing regulations to be able to fine accordingly. So last point before I close here, and to summarize, I believe that blockchain in isolation holds no value. Blockchain isn't a technology of isolation anyways. It's a composition of several different technologies we've had in a long time. It's how we're putting it together that matters. And I argue as well, it's how we use blockchain in the industry or how we actually implement it and the governance that surrounds it that matters. Connecting it with the physical world, whether that's sensor-based, input, or if it's tags as we do, as well as sensors, or if it's enterprise reporting systems and hardware, mobile, and of course the support from the legal and government's infrastructure. Because without the recognition and acknowledgement of what it is that this solution provides, then it's only as good as we say it is. So it's not a silver bullet solution. I know we hear that a lot, but it really is not. There is not a one size fits all approach either. There is no standard. There's multiple blockchains. How what you build on and how you create your system is up to you. It's not easy to design. There's transparency trade-offs. When is transparency needed? When is it not? When are trade secrets a requirement for the success of the commodity, or who's allowed in this system? Who's allowed to write? Who's allowed to read? What are they allowed to read? And it's just not easy to implement. You're asking people, in my case, on board a ship where they are dealing with heavy crude oils and spending their day in heavy machinery to start using, sci-fi technology, not least of all just putting a phone in their hand and having them do digital signatures. That's a big change in their processes. You're going from paper-based systems to digital. You're also introducing a lot of complexities in their processes. So ultimately, I think the last mile, as I argued, and the connection between the digital and the physical is what will allow us to take advantage of the accountability and traceability that blockchain brings. And thank you for letting me present today.
Many thanks, Diana. I see one question in Slido, but which is not specific to your presentation, but for other ones. So I propose that we take it at the very end of this session, and can give now the floor to Catherine. And thanks again, Catherine, to be with us. We appreciate the effort. I hope that the night is good on your side. And please, complementing what has been just introduced by Diana, I mean, explain what else is needed in order to implement blockchain solution and to avoid the fragmentation of the different initiatives. The floor is yours, Catherine.
Well, thank you very much. And I've had the pleasure of working with Deanna directly and can attest to the very considered approach that she takes, as well as Jörg. So it's very nice to be here. I hope you can hear and see me and see my screen. Please signal if that's not the case.
We can see
yes,
you.
Great. So I am coming from Washington, D.C. I'm here at the end of a 4-year posting, as well as a posting to the World Bank, and I'll be returning to Switzerland in just a matter of weeks. So really looking forward to diving further into the EU space again. I actually was with the EU Climate Kick previously and a Canadian diplomat on climate change prior to that, and also worked with the UN, just recently publishing a series of books on series of reports on big fintech. And I flag this because I think there's a lot of tools and references out there, not just that I've been involved in, but even within this the circle of speakers today, that provide some excellent background information and frameworks to answer a lot of the questions around ethics and use of blockchain on how to do it in a very considered approach, as well as the technological application, for example, with the World Bank blockchain pilot. So I just wanted to flag that, and I can provide that information as well. Today, I just want to speak about this fragmented solution space. As we've seen, a couple of really interesting projects that have worked so hard and gone very deep in solving specific solutions, and how that relates back up to the Paris Agreement, and how climate accounting, actually, and integrated climate accounting is necessary in order to bridge specific gaps that we have. And what I'm speaking about here is, having been in climate change and sustainable development for almost 30 years now, what I've seen even prior to the integration of, to the use of integrated technologies, is a very fragmented solution space, very fragmented policy space, very fragmented financial space, and even the way that we do innovation has been sort of counterproductive in a way. So what we end up with is a lot of really interesting, but highly relevant projects and initiatives happening globally, but not being able to scale. And because we have misaligned incentives and misaligned infrastructure and finances as well. And we have legacy systems building out new systems without really shifting that. And so what we're trying to do with Open Earth Foundation is to sort of take it from a collaborative, radical Earth systems approach, and but in a very practical way. And if we look at the transformation challenge for Paris, Paris focuses on national entities and their goals towards reducing emissions. But if you scratch the surface of that and look at where the solution space is and where people are doing work and where corporations are integrating, we have 195 countries. We have 1.7 million traditional corporations, plus 7.4 million partnerships and other corporations and sole proprietorships, all working on sustainable solutions in their own way. And so what I like to talk about is it's as if everyone is creating their own website, but no one's created the internet yet. So how can we integrate these, and how can we bring these solutions together to actually account for our carbon budget as we try to reach the Paris goals and agreements? Because we actually have restrictions on the amount of emissions that we can produce in order to reach Paris goals, and we are really close to failing. So it's really important, and time is running out. You know, the remaining carbon budget is we're at that breaking point right now. So it's really important that we actually start integrating and scaling the solutions that are out there. And this is, I talk about the world's accountability timeline. This is also my colleague Martin Weinstein's work, where we're looking at the Paris stocktake in 2023. We're going to do this first global accounting stocktake of where we are in reaching these goals. But we don't yet have the accounting framework in order to do that. And also in order to integrate subnational actors as well. And that's because we do have sourcing and reporting that is fragmented. So that solution space and the way that we count, similar to what Deanna said at that, you know, the infrastructure level and on the ships, it's as if everyone is calculating in their own way, and we have no way of integrating this up to that global scale. So where we are in terms of Paris and global climate accounting is lack of transparency, lack of trust, slow or little reporting, and also those layers that we talked about. And then where we need to go is to have transparency, trust, and real-time information, taking advantage of the integrated technologies that we are seeing. So what we talk. Yes.
Catherine, sorry, do you hear me? People are asking if you have a presentation, because we do not see your presentation. I'm not sure. So
I've tried to share. Yeah,
okay.
I'm sharing a PowerPoint presentation.
Okay, now we can see it. If you can put
Okay.
it in a that's it.
All right.
That's it. Go ahead.
Okay, so I can share the slides again afterwards. Sorry, there must have been a systems glitch, but here are some of the publications. This is the fragmented image of the fragmented space and where we need to go. The breadth and depth of the transformational change. So all of these actors on the one hand, and yet, as Deanna and others have suggested, the depth of the sectoral solutions that have to happen. And then in terms of time running out on our carbon budget, in terms of where we are on the accountability timeline. In 2023, we're doing this global stocktake, so we really need a way to integrate all of this data and these solutions, not just at the national level, but the subnational level. And so accounting is really critical to driving empowerment, accountability, and innovation and integrating. So we have to think about how can we do this global stocktake at that global country, state, city, company, and individual and product level in real time. So how can we integrate everything that's been talked about today for this global stocktaking going forward? And we need to have, we need to be able to integrate stakeholders across those levels, across value chains, supply chains, and we need to be able to do that at that finite level. So, but right now, because the solution space is fragmented and our systems are fragmented and our mechanisms and incentives are misaligned, we're not reaching that goal in any way. So what we're proposing is making global climate accounting possible through an open global ledger driven by blockchain technology that is trusted and using privacy mechanisms so that accounts for the energy element. So what we can do is actually integrate the various technologies and the tools to capture and digitize the information of the climate action up to that global accounting scale. And this will allow data analysis also through artificial intelligence and machine learning providing those tools to analyze towards that global accounting system. And what this means then is we can actually integrate those actors in the real world, at the global, the company, the individual, and SME level, into that digital world for the global stock take under the Paris Agreement. And so this is sort of the frame of reference. And how we're actually building this out is through the incentive around the fact that we only have 3 years to do this. And right now the costs are at 500 million if this is going to happen. But who's going to pay is also a big question. How can we actually address the mismatched reporting, the different manual accounting and reconciliation that is necessary? How do we account for non-state actor data that is not directly integrated into state inventories? How can we solve for misaligned incentives and bottom-up sources of information? We really need a systems approach. And as I said, it's as if people are building out websites, but no one's created the internet. So this is what we are proposing, or we are actually building, is a nested integrated carbon accounting system that uses digital accounting, sort of digital technologies, and integrates those across the level. So the architecture of this is what we're actually building out. It started at Yale and MIT, and we're actually using DLT, MRV, AI to integrate at each level the data and information necessary. And this looks massive. It's at a massive scale, but we're doing it very practically by actually focusing in on pilots to really prove that the system can be done, and that we actually can then scale and roll that out across the actors. So the process, as you know, the Paris focuses on national level data, and that data is blind to participants below at non-state actors. So by creating this accounting network and data aggregation process in parallel to the global stocktake, we're allowing this to actually take place. We're integrating that fragmented solution space. So we're consolidating multi-stakeholder collaborative network of networks and combining that private and public entity interaction and leaders in the data sourcing and reporting and analytics space to actually make this possible. And so this is actually right now our sort of network of network, where we're working across the board at all levels: the state, the independent accounting, non-state, market level, financial accounting, and earth level. So this is really a necessary step to focus on radical collaboration, but it has to be very practical. And by creating this type of architecture and using specific DLT mechanisms and integrated technology, we're able to layer the blockchain layers and the interoperable systems and make those systems interoperable. So creating sort of a platform of platforms, and then also allowing data integration. But we have to do this, you know, on a case-by-case basis to prove the concept and then build that out and scale. So this is basically the approach. I only have 3 final slides to really show how nested climate accounting in this sort of spatial web would look like. And this is where you're taking from that local level, individual level, and project level, right up to the international level for the Paris stocktake, right through that, being able to align specific data units for that stocktake. And that really entails, you know, finessing the climate standards and protocols and the common language, but through the actual data that we're using and the technology we're building out. So this will allow us to do this across the board, regardless of where that data is coming from. And so what we're looking at is building out this networked and trusted climate market capacity and data and accounting system. to allow for the non-state actors and other partners to actually integrate and actually build into this global accounting system. So the next steps in action are actually integrating the pilots in the context of private-public interfaces. We're consolidating our multi-stakeholder collaboration networks. We have a number of action labs and working groups already on the ground. And then we're supporting this open source digital infrastructure based on a multi-year system approach. So this is basically where I'll stop. I do have other slides available on, the finer points of this and how we're integrating into climate finance, as well as the practical projects on solar and digital green bonds. But the whole concept is to actually create that internet, the climate accounting internet, where everyone will be able to sort of integrate and scale. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Catherine, for this great presentation, which indeed, let's say, extended what was already introduced by the previous speakers. And but indeed, if blockchain is a technology in order to ensure the data integrity and also to facilitate the sharing of data, I mean, there is a huge effort to organize the collection of the data. And indeed, I think it was very clear from your presentation that it means also blockchain to be integrated with other technology in order to also to exploit those data with artificial intelligence. But all the organization aspect, which was stressed by previous speakers, are indeed very relevant and are also in
So I'm not sure, I think there's a pause here. If I might answer just if that was a question, because I think Deanna also noted this, that the human interface is key here. In order for any of this to happen, the toolbox is necessary actually around intellectual property. It's about the collaboration toolboxes, how we're actually going to integrate. This, SDG 17 is partnerships, and yet this is the most spoken about term. This is the most highly used term in blockchain is partnership and collaboration. Yet what we really need at another level is the legal, the intellectual property side, the capacity to facilitate these collaborations in a much more effective way. And those are the toolboxes that are really necessary here. And technology and blockchain actually has a convening capacity. It's bringing us together to actually solve for that level as well.
Yeah, thanks. And since you have the floor, I can take one question from the audience, which is actually who will be the moderator of or the governors or the, let's say, the animators of this new let's say connected data space or the new internet that you have described in your presentation?
Oh, I mean, this is the big question, right? And so the collaborative approach is a network of networks. So we are doing this as a not-for-profit, and I think that's a really essential element, and we are not a non-state actor. Are we the ones who are most appropriate to be doing this? That's not a question that we really are answering. It's really, we're just filling the space. But we're doing this already in collaboration with the World Bank, with the UN, and I see other questions about other sectoral areas. So this, today we talked about the climate accounting, but it really is about how can we bring the actors together in a space to do this, and how will this be governed, right? Well, DLT in a way will take care of the governance of this, so you won't run into the same problems that we have with the internet as the analogy.
Many thanks, Catherine. I don't know if we have other who want to react about this key question and complement what has been said by. If no reaction. We have a very specific question which are related to the presentation of Diana regarding how similar systems that the one you have presented can help to progress on biomarkers or sensors, and we have a different question also which are not that express the curiosity of the audience regarding the use of blockchain, not directly for climate change, but for Diana. Do you want to take that one?
Yeah. So just in case I missed anything there, that the questions around the progress on biomarkers and biosensors to provide extra services, and whether that similar solutions would be relevant. I do very much see that as being one of the directions to explore and to further develop, especially again when it comes to supply chain tracing and commodity tracing. Ideally on my side. So I do a lot of, we brought this company together with Block being the blockchain experts that had the solution, and Forecast Technology that had the DNA. So it was a joint venture. And we've done one application, but the applications are endless. And ideally, I would be partnering with already existing organizations that have done the blockchain traceability aspects or supply chain tracing, and then need that physical connection. We just have to do a bit of R&D as to where it's applied, specifically this biomarker, but there are several out there you can use. So I think I'll like continue to figure out the intersection between the digital and the physical. And if there are any supply chains out there that can benefit from physical tracing, I'd be happy to just plug it into their existing solution so that it can be then plugged into to Catherine's structure there too. Eventually, we're on the bottom here of the getting that data up and running. So yeah, collaboration and partnerships I think are the only way forward. And any of them that have the existing solutions that want to build it out and physically trace, just call me.
Will do. Now we have from the audience other question. Many thanks, Diana, which concern actually the robustness of blockchain, and one of our listeners is reference to the case of DIO, and to which extent actually blockchain is really mutable or is enough for implementing those solutions. So I don't know if you want to take this question, or Jörg can take it, or anyone. Technical question, I would say. Jörg, do you want to take it?
Yes, I'm not sure if I fully understood the question, but I think the topic is about the robustness of blockchain solutions. And what we see in the use cases is that you often don't, as I said earlier, you don't have the pure blockchain. Also, the blockchain by itself is only part of the system, and maybe it's the less important part. Of course, it's important. It brings trust. It brings immutability to a certain extent, but still, you need interfaces. You need that last mile, which is the interesting part that also Diana talked about, the interaction with the world. And also another sphere that you need is governance, and you need to build the blockchains from the beginning in such a way that the governance can also work. And you have to have some processes. If, for instance, some data is wrong, then you don't delete that data, but you do a new entry into the database to correct that. And you need to have a identified authority who has the power, the governmental framework to be able to do that. And therefore, I think the whole world around the blockchain is much more important, be it technically the interfaces, but also in terms of governments, who has the right to change things, to correct things. These are the really important questions.
Yes, many thanks, Jörg. Indeed, there are different ways to implement blockchain, and and so all those things are particularly important, and also for let's say organizing let's say the continuity of services in case in case there is a problem. I think that we have more or less covered the different questions that have been raised so far through the Slido. Looking at the clock, we have 4 minutes to close the meeting. Perhaps I could give you nearly 1 minute to each of you in order to pass one key message in less than 1 minute to the audience about what you consider as very relevant regarding using the use of blockchain for climate actions. Jörg, since you are here, I propose that we start with you, and then we will we'll go back to Antoine and to Diana and Catherine, and of course Marco at the end.
Thank you. I think what we see is that is a certain development of the blockchain issue. At the beginning, many thought this is magic, and then there was a huge boom and also a bit of a bust. And I think now we see what actually works and what works less. And I think important is to see that it is mostly the combination also with other technology that makes blockchain really excited, being be it with sensors, with tracing, with Internet of Things, with remote sensing. These combinations that are tried out in many different use cases, they make this really exciting, and also will help to do climate action much better, much more efficient, and in a more trusted way.
Many thanks, Jörg. Antoine, do you want to give your 1 minute message?
Yeah, 1 minute message. I think that I will do the same parallels as Catherine. I think that we are with blockchain where we were with TCP/IP 20 years ago at the beginning of the web. So everybody nobody knows what is TCP/IP, but everybody knows the web of today. So this is for us an opportunity to create the new worlds of the change, and we need to make sure that we use this technology to serve the climate environment. But yes, definitely it's just a technology that is for us and for all of us to make sure that we use it in the right way at the service of the environment.
Thank you, Antoine. Diana?
I will build on all of the previous to say as well that, you know, the blockchain as a component in a solution, and the definition of how we use blockchain is really the important societal aspect that we still have to come across. The supporting legal and insurance-based structures that we'll need to recognize what we are producing as technical evidence is going to be absolutely key to the acceptance of these technologies as any type of verification tool, which is basically what we're talking about here. And that the collaboration of the ecosystem and collaboration amongst different solution providers is going to be, again, another critical component to the success of any one given solution.
Many thanks, Diana. Catherine, last statement?
Oh, how can I follow up on those wonderful statements? I would also say that I think it behooves us as a global innovation community to think about how we're incentivizing innovation, particularly in this space, and that to re-examine how we're actually promoting technology and startups in this space where we're focusing on competition instead of collaboration. So I would look for new types of financing and incentivization in the space as well at a policy level to make sure that we actually can pave the path forward to integrating and collaborating rather than staying put in our individual silos and not being able to scale up the solutions that are really desperately needed.
Thank you. The message is clear. And since Catherine addressed the policy level, Marco, perhaps you can say also a final word before that we thank all our colleagues and the participants to this session.
Yeah, Thank you very much, Pierre. Yes, indeed. I mean, it was very interesting today's session, and I think as a regulator, what I can take home, of course, are all the different challenges that we have in front of us. Personally, I believe it's just a matter of time that we will start using in a very operational way blockchain as also the other digital tools in combination among themselves or really together with the traditional legislative tools that we have been using so far. It's just a matter of time. The problem is that we don't have much time. So it's better if we all try to speed up and try really to do our best in order to cooperate all together, really, because we need all the possible tools available in order really to change these incredible targets that we have in front of us, which are related to complete change, complete rethinking, reworking of our society, our way of life.
Many thanks, Marco. So to conclude this event, first I would like to apologize for the small problem that we had with some presentation, but all the presentation will be made available and you will have access to them. And if you have specific questions, some of the speakers we can ask ourselves in order to transfer those questions. I would like to thank you, the audience, for your question, for following those presentations, those debates, which I hope have enlightened you about the value of using blockchain, not in isolation, as it was said, but in combination with other technology and also with organizations that will help to address the climate challenges. I warmly thank all the speakers, so Catherine, Diana, Antoine, and Jörg, and of course my colleagues Marco. And before to close the event, I would like to inform you that Connect the digital economy and digital for circular economy and zero pollution. So we are really many presentation, great statement and input for in future events. Have a good day. Bye.
Okay, bye.